Whenever there's a new tool, everybody goes crazy and they forget the fact that there's actually a story, and that's the point. You're telling a story using tools. You're not using tools to tell a story. If you understand that.
I do.
The point was, the other thing that got abused naturally in a capitalist society, especially in an American point of view, which is the studios and everything said, well, wow, we can make a lot of money. This is the license to kill. And they did it. They just simply, and of course the only way you can really do that is not take chances. Only do something that's proven.
So, I guess it's no secret that over the past years, prequels have made some sort of a comeback in fashion. Not to say that they didn't have fans to begin with, but it's clear that the majority of the fandom has warmed up to the idea of prequels, compared to, the initial reception. And fandom's excitement and support for Hayden Christensen and Eva McGregor's comebacks do nothing but support this opinion. And for a while I was convinced that over time the hate towards the sequel trilogy would slowly but progressively subside as the initial disappointment would morph into the acceptance. But no, people still seem to be quite passionate about their dislike towards the Disney Star Wars. And even though prequels have received their fair share of criticism over the years, the hate targeted at them as of lately does not even come remotely close to what sequels have been experiencing. You could say that comparing prequels to sequels is basically trying to distinguish which train wreck is more of a train wreck, but if they're both so unforgivably bad, then why is one's terribleness overshadowing the others? Might it be because the freshness of the wounds that the sequel trilogy has left to the fans stinks so much that they distract from the pain of the old ones? Or might it be that because they're both considered to be bad for completely different reasons, one's faults are more easily forgivable than the others? Well, I would argue that it's a hint of both, but in my opinion, things are a hell of a lot more complicated than that. To kickstart this video, let's get some things out of the way. This video is by no means going to delve into the substance, plots, or characters, or anything really in these movies, because I feel like, for one, it's probably one of the most debated topics on the platform, and secondly, I really don't have any wish to do so. Rather, in the video, I'm going to look at how the context and circumstances of the movie can affect and shift its entire value and narrative, especially when it comes to prequels. But before we travel to galaxy far, far away in order to observe Skywalker's dramatic story, let's travel around the globe with the help of today's sponsor. And you know what also might be very traumatic and disheartening? Not even being able to watch your favorite characters go through trauma. And that is where today's sponsor, AtlasVPN, comes to your rescue. As you may or may not know, I'm not from the US or any English-speaking country either. Therefore, for me, it has always been a headache to figure out the ways to access my favorite movies, TV shows, or music, until I found out about VPN, and today I have a pleasure to introduce to you AtlasVPN that offers you an early access to its online protection with 86% discount and 3 extra months for free. And you can get this early access to AtlasVPN's Black Friday deal by clicking the special link down in the description. And as I previously mentioned, I am unable to access a lot of movies, including Disney, which, if you haven't noticed, I love to pick apart on this channel. But under protection and help of AtlasVPN's lightning fast services, I'm surely going to be able to do it for a very long time, without worrying about my data's safety. And AtlasVPN offers to protect an unlimited amount of devices with a single subscription and helps you to save some additional coins while shopping online. And you can get all this for free for 3 months and get a 3-year-long deal for the most affordable price of $1.39 a month if you click the special link down in the description. Again, thanks AtlasVPN for sponsoring this video, and now let's go back to Galaxy Far, Far Away. As we all know, studios make movies to make money, and the best way to a fan's wallet is through their heart. But how does one win over their heart? For starters, we have to realize that when it comes to making movies for franchises as big as this, there is always a preceding legacy the new movie has to uphold and support in order to please the fans. Most notably, Marvel has been really good at making bank through understanding and implementing fans' wishes at the expense of predictability, which is a practice they've mastered over the past decade, and which is getting real old real fast, but I guess it's working, so whatever. And here, we see the biggest difference between the prequels and sequels leading up to their release. release. 2 years before the premiere of Phantom Menace, in 1997, Lucasfilm released the infamous special editions of the original trilogy to prepare the ground for the prequel trilogy, which in turn created a whole debate of the who shot first, and added the horrid and totally unnecessary CGI to otherwise practically created visual masterpiece. But to say that these cosmetic changes affected the history or the canon of Star Wars would be a huge stretch. Otherwise, prequels did not really subtract much from the original 3 movies. The existence of Jar Jar might have caused a lifelong trauma, but his existence did not really affect the course of the canon, simply because while making the trilogy, George Lucas made sure to play into already established story. Therefore, the prequels' badness only had a significance in terms of the lost potential. The rest of the Star Wars canon did not really suffer from it, and the original trilogy remained untouched and sacred. On the other hand, let's fast forward to April 2014, when Disney announced that in preparation for the upcoming sequel trilogy, all the expanded universe, which played a huge role in most Star Wars fans' lives for decades, would be entirely retconned. We could rightfully say that this fact didn't really dishearten most of the fans, because their hope for the new canon most likely overpowered any type of heartbreak they had for the last one. But I find it absolutely ironic that one of the first things Disney did regarding the sequel trilogy was to ultimately disregard everything the fans loved about the expanded universe, the same fans they were planning to capitalize off of a year later. This fact, in my opinion, is one of the most important shaping factors for the sequel trilogy, because these movies did not only have to be good, no, they also had to prove themselves to be better than any retconned material in order to validate their decanonization. And as the hopes for the new trilogy faded away, so did fans' nonchalance towards Disney's cold shoulder towards the legends. Not only that, but sequels had the additional pressure to sum up the saga, the pressure that was absent in the case of prequels. Because of the timeline, the sequel trilogy and original trilogy were about to be intertwined in inseparable ways. Since the last 3 movies had the responsibility to validate and tie all not-so-loose ends introduced in the past. And if they failed at doing just that, their actions would forever affect our perception of the past trilogies. For example, I haven't watched any of the original movies since 2019, cause the idea that all 9 movies culminated in the epic finale of Rey Skywalker Palpatinovich making a playground out of a place where all Luke, Anakin, and Leia received the trauma of their lives is kind of disheartening a bit. And yes, we could deny it and deem it as uncanon, but I think it's only a matter of time till the image of Rey pops up like, hello there. So, while prequels disappointed fans just by their poor quality, sequels disappointed fans by quality, their inability to validate the retconning of the past canon, and by failing to deliver a coherent conclusion to, anything really, which in turn potentially distorted the viewer's perception of the rest of the saga. Forever. I feel like as the years pass, the amount of influence Clone Wars had on making people, if not like, but at least not dislike the prequel trilogy, is becoming more and more evident. This was earned because Lucasfilm, realizing the overwhelmingly disappointed reaction that the 3 movies gained from the public, did not get scared away and try to retcon and get ashamed of these movies. No, Lucasfilm decided to stick with the campiness, and of course not fully, but at the very least embrace the story told in these movies. And it worked. Clone Wars took in a refined prequel trilogy and made sort of an era in Star Wars history, the era of camp and Galactic Republic and politics, the one that both prequel lovers and haters both look back today with nostalgia. That same nostalgia that Disney's milking the heck out of today. People did not warm up to prequels because, 10 years later they discovered that they were good this whole time. No, it happened because Lucasfilm itself did not abandon the prequels. When general public put up a huge red flag, Lucasfilm took it as a challenge to prove them wrong, and they succeeded. They succeeded at proving that with some better writing, prequels could be just as fascinating and exciting as the original one.
Well, it's funny, you always want to create new characters, but then you go out there and talk to fans. I really hope Yoda's in this. I really want to see Yoda, or I want to see General Grievous. I mean, they have characters that they like to catch up on. They want to know what Yoda's up to, so have to have them be involved. But when you involve them, you have to be very careful how you portray them. And that's why we're lucky George is involved, because I always know that our portrayal of Yoda or Padme is exactly what he wants it to be, because he'll tell me if it's not, that's for sure. Rob Coleman, actually, who was the animation director on the prequels, gave me a great piece of advice, which was, make George happy. If he's happy with this, then it's going to work. And so that, of course, was my main focus, is making a Star Wars that George Lucas was proud of, obviously proud enough to want to put it up on the big screen.
What Disney has been doing with the sequel trilogy lately is a modern equivalent of if Lucasfilm back in 2000 said, "Oh well, people don't seem to like Anakin. Let's go back to Luke's story and milk that instead, and we would forever be stuck in the Empire and never get characters like Ahsoka Tano." On the contrary, Disney started to distance themselves from sequels far before the last movie of the trilogy was even released. They're doing their absolute best to make the audience forget that sequels were even a thing, abandoning every single character and plot that was introduced in them, and instead choosing an easy way out by going back to Mandalorian, Clone Wars, Obi-Wan, Boba Fett, Ahsoka Lando. No sign of Rey, no sign of Poe, no Finn, no Kylo, nothing. Differently from the modern Lucasfilm, instead of getting upset and denying everything, they started to take the characters of prequels out of the context of the movies, and putting them in hands of better storylines and writers. Because of Disney's pettiness and cowardness, sequel characters will probably forever remain limited to being sequel characters, and never become a part of a bigger Star Wars legacy. While on the contrary, characters like Anakin and Obi-Wan and Padme now exist even outside of their movies, rendering them memorable and layered, showing the audience and making them appreciate what George Lucas so thoughtfully envisioned and so miserably failed to deliver in the movies. And hey, what a beautiful word vision is. Yeah, sequels did not have a vision, which is probably what most of you have been thinking throughout this entire video, and you'd be completely right. Now, let's not confuse prequels with visionary masterpieces, because they're anything but. But we have to realize that people's main problem with prequels was not with the lack of vision, but how the given vision was delivered on screen. On the other hand, the problem with sequels was not with the delivery, but with the fact that there was not much to deliver in the first place. It feels like at the beginning of the journey, Disney wrote down a list of what they wanted to include in the trilogy to maximize its appeal, and tried to market a single soulless checklist as a coherent story with a vision and purpose. A cool villain with a cool mask? Check. The strong female lead? Check. The colored supporting character to not seem racist? Check. While prequels had a story to tell, sequels had boxes to check.
These are my kids. Well, I loved them, I created them. I'm very intimately involved in them, and obviously to sell them off, I sold them to the white slavers that take these things and
A person might learn to overlook the camp to appreciate the story, but how one might learn to appreciate the story if it only exists in a form of agenda? And this makes sense if you consider that episodes 1, 2, and 3 came from a head of a single man in a single room with a single man's will, while episodes 7, 8, and 9 came from a corporation that had to balance will and opinions of dozens of writers, producers, marketing specialists, managers, corporates, etc.
I disliked the business of Hollywood intensely. I didn't want them coming and commenting on my work and putting their little ideas in there. And because I needed to make sure I controlled the vision and not have it be diluted by a lot of other people, I ended up with a company, and the company was successful, and movies were successful.
And of course, at last, how could I forget the memes? And oh, there are memes. I mean, what can I say? There's nothing more hilarious than a 20-year-old movie unintentionally succeeding at being more relevant, trendy, and up-to-date than a movie that literally came out 2 years ago. And of course we could write this off as a mere coincidence, but in my opinion it is anything but. One feeling I always get from watching the last of the sequel trilogy is one that no one really wanted to be in it anymore. Like, you can watch prequel trilogy knowing that all these actors must have been painfully aware how badly their movie was going to be received. But not once you get the sense that they didn't give it their 100%. You can't convince me that Ewan McGregor, at any point of any of these movies, didn't have the time of his life while being on set. And even if their charisma was not enough to compensate for the terrible dialogue, it definitely translated into the charmingness and entertaining silliness that people appreciate about prequels today. And I'm convinced that heart of it all was George Lucas himself. His passion and love for his vision truly infected and made it easy for the cast and crew to share it. But how can a writer inspire an actor or even a cameraman to care about his creation when he himself is doing it out of obligation? To be honest, I've never been a huge fan of the prequels, but I never understood why so many people got slack for disliking sequels while wholeheartedly enjoying prequels. Yes, The Rise of Skywalker might look, sound, and act more like a legitimate movie than The Return of the Sith, but only one of these movies is responsible for one of the best animated series of all time, a complete catalog of new material, and if you overlook the camp, a heartbreaking story that ties perfectly into the timeline. On the other hand, you have a movie that, made one particular mouse $1 billion richer.
So, with that, I'm gone. Bye-bye, thank you.
I'm all set. All I need is an idea.